all of the bullishness surrounding AI is very well deserved.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future
And
results.
we are
Any indices
back with
referenced for
another edition
comparison
of
are
the Daily
unmanaged and cannot
Dots, and
be
I am
invested into
joined as
directly.
always
Any
by the
references to
brain
performance
trust
of
himself,
securities are
Mr.
thought to be
Chase
materially
Taylor.
accurate and actual performance may differ. As always, please
My
remember investing
pseudo
involves
working
risk.
summer of leisure continues, hence the backdrop. Meanwhile, Chase, being the more responsible of the two of us, still in there grinding in the office. So you and I were having, let's hop right into it. We can get into the indexes next, but I really think that, at least in my opinion, this is the main thing I'm thinking about. It's the main thing I'm wrestling with. It's the main thing I'm struggling with, which is, and it is Monday, right? Macro Monday, after all. And so let's focus on kind of that macro picture and where we're at. There is really bullish sentiment in this market in a lot of different places. Um, Valuation picture hasn't changed at all. Everybody knows, we're extraordinarily expensive. I think you make a case for this being the first or second most expensive market in all time. Um, Having said that, I think there are times that we're crazier, meaning I think that there's still some decent narratives out there that justify the elevated prices. Like most things, in my opinion, I think it's probably run too far. The issue that I'm having at the present, though, right now, and we've seen this in this market multiple times, and it's the walking into a buzzsaw deal that scares me. And the reason why I say this is, in the past, markets tended to price things in instantly, right? So, like, as bad news came out, you had incremental adjustment in price, and you were, that's what they did, right? That makes sense. And the reason why it happens is, if new news comes out on company A, B, C tomorrow, whoever's transacting in that stock is going to have a piece of information that they're going to use that guides that transaction, that guides that trace, that trade, that guides that price action. And so therefore that piece of news is getting priced in, right? I'm not exactly sure all of the different dynamics. I think me and a lot of other sensible people, maybe I wouldn't be considered sensible by some, um, but I think passive has a lot to do with this. But we've just seen it multiple times where you see a problem building in the corner, and then you look over at the market and you're like, huh, well, that looks like a real issue, but the market isn't reacting to it at all. And then that issue metastasizes. And when it becomes completely unavoidable, right? Then it all gets priced in at the same time. That's what worries me about this environment, because the market to me is acting like that, meaning I don't think the market should be collapsing at present. But I think when you look at the stocks that are advancing, the nature in which they're advancing in, the economic backdrop they're advancing in, and then looking at the economic news, it feels to me like you're in one of those separations again, where the market has run away from the narrative and reality. And that scares me, because it's very difficult to trade. Meaning, I look at the market, I look at the macro, again, macro Monday, I'm looking at all these things. I see an environment that warrants a lot of caution. They're just, I think it's crazy if people don't see that. Yet you look at the stock market and it's telling you there's nothing but blue skies, baby. VIX at 16. Um, so normally I would sit there and go, this is when you want to lower your exposure. Um, but in this crazy market, you're always afraid of it running away from you. I will say this though, I have a very hard time seeing this advance continue the way it has, without some softening, a pullback, some stuff. But we'll see. What are your thoughts on all this, Chase?
Yeah, my problem is some third guessing of myself. I'm confident we do get that pullback, but a lot of that is because we always do, in this late summer, early fall kind of period. But because the reason for the third guessing is just a lot of people are talking about that, pointing it out, and that just freaks me out a little bit. But going back to like what you're talking about with, when the economy itself starts to pull back a little bit, it makes sense for the market to kind of look at that and go, wait a second. And we're not seeing that. I think I think 95% of data the market should probably ignore. I think 90% of bad prints the market should ignore. I don't think that last jobs print the market should ignore. Like that was we know at turning points, and now this can get re-revised better or whatever, and for all we know, it's not that big a deal. But as of now, what we do know, those revisions were so significant that it looks like what we often see at these big inflection points, these big switches in the labor market, where you have a bunch of revisions. So revisions are totally normal. We always see them. They happen to cluster in large size around these big pivot points where like the labor market goes from being fine to just not at all pretty quickly, and that almost always catches the Fed off guard,
Well, it's a trend
because
change.
they don't know until they see the revision, right?
It's a trend change, right? I mean,
Yeah,
very simply, like it's just the way it works. Like you don't know whether you're looking at short-term volatility, and for those at home, you can think of it just like a chart, right? You don't know whether this is short-term volatility or whether this is a trend change until that new data comes in and confirms one way or the other.
yeah. It was a big enough change in the last 3 months data to suggest like, oh, like this, what we thought this labor market was about, it might have changed substantially. And that would be one thing if you could zoom out and look at all the like other macro stuff and go, yeah, but the macro stuff's fine. But for me, at least, I look at the other stuff and go, ooh, no. Like I'm worried about construction jobs. I'm worried about state and local government jobs because of their budgets. I'm worried about manufacturing jobs, trucking jobs. I'm going into 2026. I'm worried about healthcare jobs. That's like the last peg, like
Tech
holding us up
jobs,
here.
tech jobs, man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like we talked about this last week. The tech jobs as a percent of all jobs had been doing really nice, and it's just since ChatGPT came out, just it's just fallen off a cliff. It's like its proportion. So that's not a great mix. Like you may end up in a situation where you have less people working and less income, and then you get into that feedback loop where it all feeds on itself and becomes a real problem. So knowing that, does it make sense to me that the market's where we were on that jobs print? No, not at all. Because I'm not sure how earnings, like why would earnings do what everyone thinks they're going to do for the next 2 years, call it, if we're going to go from growing at 3% to growing at 1, 0, negative, like all that seems possible all of a sudden, after a few years of just running right along at chugging along at 3% growth. So yeah, I think the market is a little asleep at the switch. Plus, this is kind of interesting. We know Mag 7's margins are great. We were talking about margins for a second right before we hit record, but if you look at equal weights margins, like they're actually, it looks like almost like a secular decline. They've kind of started to hit. I think you peaked at like 18 or something. So the average stock out there, their margins are already coming down. Obviously, to me at least, tariffs are going to further pinch margins. So other than big tech's margins, which I don't think are bulletproof either,
Not with the capex that they got going on.
right? They're going to be lucky to have profits before too long if they keep
Well,
throwing
and you well,
hundreds of billions at stuff.
and if you want to point to one issue that I see as a big vulnerability in the market, I think that it's sort of a two-sided coin. I think that all of the excitement and all of the um, all of the bullishness surrounding AI is very well deserved. Having said that, I think that that's going to do things. I think that only the upside of that is being looked at, right? Meaning one thing that is clearly not priced into a lot of these tech stocks in any way, shape, or form is that capex. I think you could make an argument that maybe it's priced into some degree for Google just because it's substantially
It's,
cheaper than the rest.
it's being priced
Um,
as a positive, which is kind of wild.
yeah, and that's ridiculous. Um, and then the other thing that you've got to think about is that it is highly likely, at least the way that we see the world setting up today, I think it's more likely that there will be less winners of AI than there were like in, the internet per se, right? Like and which means a lot of that capex is 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 just going to be dead weight, right?
Yeah,
Like
it feels a little bit like overbuilding railroads or overbuilding fiber or something where like not everyone's going to win. I mean, you would think, and it's so resource intense that it it's like a wild, you know, parabolic curve that you have to go on if you want to go try to win it. And at the moment, we still have like I don't know 4, 5, 6 players like just throwing that much, you know, crazy compute and power and stuff at it. So to me, like you either go all in or you go all out. Like just get out of it and just be like, look, we'll just pay you guys we'll just pay our toll to be on your system. We're not trying to be the system. You either do that or you go all in to try to win the whole shebang. But so far, it seems like everyone's all in. Like no one's really opted out.
yeah, no, I well, and to a certain degree, that's very understandable. Like you and I have talked
Yeah,
about, that this is like a technological Oklahoma land rush. Um, and if you're in that sector, you're one of those companies, it's the opportunity of a lifetime and an existential threat all at the same time, right?
right.
And like you said, I mean, yeah, there's going to be some tremendous winners. I think that those winners will be, I think there will be fewer than most anticipate. Um, but for instance, like I think Meta's a pretty good example. You know, you should not like when you've got a company like Meta that's dumping that level of capex and to the point where they're now taking out 30 billion in debt, right? Like that should get priced in. That should a company taking out and look, I'm not saying that 30 billion is going to drive them, but you're looking at these cash cow companies and hopefully it's a home run for them. But you're looking at these cash cow companies engaging in really the only activities that could potentially ruin them. Do you get what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
they've got to take the leap. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm saying you're going from these unbelievable, uninhibited cash flowing machines to now taking risks and making investments that could greatly jeopardize that. And again, I'm not saying that Meta should get killed for it, but when I see a market that is driving a stock up on that announcement, I think that just tells you all you need to know. That's not that them making that investment is not in any way a competitive advantage. It's all about how they roll that investment out. There's going to be luck involved, timing, all these different things. Um, look at what they're spending on talent. I mean, like I said, it could be an absolute game change winner for Meta, but like you've got to sit back simultaneously and look at the risk. And I don't think any.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate and actual performance may differ.
and it reminds me a lot of the railroad bubble in that way. Which speaking of, so this is already the second biggest like capex uh, we've ever seen as far as percentage GDP. This is 1.2% of GDP right now.
A
Um,
year or total?
I think a year.
Oh,
I could be wrong on that, but maybe it's
it sounds
cumulative.
right.
But um, the comm services internet one was 1%, and railroads were 6% of GDP. So that was just, but like we clearly overbuilt and built railroads where we didn't need to have them. And when I think about this AI thing, I almost think of like a small town that needs one water utility, but they have five. So like all five water companies build a pipe to your house, and you're just like, I just want that one. It kind of feels
You
like
know,
that.
yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that light, but you're right. It kind of reminds me of like Global Crossing. Right? Remember that company
No,
that built out all the. Okay, well,
okay,
one of the parts of
that
the
was not
dot
trading
com.
in back in .com. So
One of the parts of the dot com bubble that I think gets missed or that people forget about is we focus on all the dot com companies, but there was also simultaneously a telecom bubble, and there was just this belief at the time. The attitude about fiber optics was very similar to the attitude about AI. Like there will never be too much, and the issue is we're not going to be able to put enough fiber in the ground. Well, all of a sudden the dot com bubble burst, and demand, you know what I mean? Internet traffic dropped, like all those things. And those companies went from being unstoppable behemoths with this unbelievable runway in front of them to bankrupt in like 2 years, right? You found a lot of fraud in there. That's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that allegory.
But
But
the flip side though is, if the first person that reaches like a super intelligence like thing, like everyone else has artificial intelligence and you have artificial mega intelligence, like you just start crushing people and making all the money at that point. So it's risky to not go after that and try to be the ones that get that. But to me, like as soon as you feel like you're not going to be the winner, you just take an axe to your capex and you just back down. That's the way I see it. But
yep, yep. And maybe then try to make investments in what you think is going to be the winner or something like that. Um, but I do agree with you. I think that you're, well, you know what? Actually, if we think about it by definition, of absolutely there's malinvestment going on. Absolutely you're overcooking this, right? Like that's, and what I mean by that is in a land rush like this, you know there's going to be misallocation of capital. It's a have to, because to say that there isn't going to be misallocation of capital or reckless capex would be to simultaneously say that there will be no losers, right? So
right, exactly.
it's just, what is the percentage? I don't know, but when you see the land rush going like this and the numbers that were thrown out there, you have to assume that it's probably going to be pretty historic in terms of the amount of over. Now, the question will be, AI looks like something that could soak up that slack pretty quick, right? Because whenever you have these overbuilds, it's not the end, right? It's like, okay, how long will it take for the underlying reality to catch up and put it to work, right? Like, for instance, a lot of that fiber that drove Global Crossings bankrupt back in 2000, 2001 is still being utilized today, right? People are
Right,
making money
exactly.
off it today. So it'll get picked up. It'll get absorbed. Um, the question will be how much. The other side of it too is, philosophically speaking, I still think, and I think you're starting to see it get appreciated with the rise of the precious metals, gold, things like that. Um, Looking out a little further, I think that I don't think I know that investors are light of real assets, generally speaking. Um, that I just like it's like an annoying tap on the shoulder, right? I just keep getting that reminder in a fiat world where the imbalances of debt are getting so large, right? You're just looking at all the factors, looking at whether or not whether we're going to be able to tell the difference between something that's been created by artificial intelligence or something that's real. You looking at all these factors, there's that nagging tapping on my shoulder that just keeps going, don't forget about real assets. Don't forget about real assets. And I still think that is the most overlooked trade in the world today. And I'm kind of kicking myself because you spending some time deep in thought. I remember talking to you about this. Um, and it's probably not something we could have put on anyway, just because we got to manage risk and all that kind of stuff. But like a year and a half ago, I kind of remember spending some time deep in thought, doing one of those. I'm driving somewhere, but you let the brain spin, let it do its thing. And I was thinking to myself, when I look at the world today, it really feels like a two trade world, or like just one trade, right? And that is to be long tech, especially the kind of to be long AI and long commodities, especially precious metals. And I wish we would have been more in those too, because I mean that's a big reason for our outperformance, especially this year. But that structure to that portfolio, or even thinking about it in terms of AI and real assets, I think for the foreseeable future, that's going to be I think if you have a portfolio concentrated on both of those things, my guess is, I'm not recommending anybody go do that. This is not investment advice. My guess is that portfolio would do pretty well over the next 5 years.
Yeah, unless unless you get one AI winner and the rest get absolutely smashed or something like that. But it's hard to argue with. I think at the end of the day, the current AI winners won't necessarily be the big winners in the end, although a couple of them might be. Whoever gives it to the consumer in the best way is going to be the ultimate giant winner, and that just remains to be seen. And that just may be like everything you already do; they just throw AI into it, and they all win in that kind of way. Maybe like I don't know if you've seen like Duolingo has crushed it lately because people's first thought was like, oh well, Duolingo, like who needs that with AI? And then it turns out, well, they put AI into their own system really well and made it great. And people were like, oh, this is awesome. So now all of a sudden they're, inflecting higher. So if you kind of apply the Duolingo model to all things, services and software.
Let me highlight my own ignorance here for a second. Duolingo is one of those stocks. Obviously, I've heard a lot about. I don't know anything about them. What do they do?
So let me go double check myself before I start talking like that dude on CNBC. But I'm pretty sure, yeah, it's just a way to learn languages essentially.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah, I
Yeah,
know,
it's like
okay.
it's just a
It's like a
mobile
Rosetta
app.
Stone.
Yeah, yep,
Okay,
education platform to go learn languages in a maybe a more thoughtful way than you know we've done
I'm
in the
just gonna learn
past.
the languages via Neuralink, man. I'm just gonna have Elon download it. You know, and be
Well,
like
you can
Keanu.
we're already getting like the Google Glass and all the people doing these where like in real time it will do the overlay in your glasses to tell you what someone's saying,
Yeah,
which that kind of stuff, that's like the literal thing I've wanted AI to do forever.
yeah, that's pretty smoking. Well, I didn't even realize, and I'm sure you knew this, but Perplexity already has one of those services, right? Where you can just turn in, tell it what language somebody's speaking, and you just turn it on, and it sits there and just translates for you in real time.
Yeah, and I guess some people have like hardware now where it's like a two-sided hardware and you can just talk to each other and read the screen. So it's pretty
Yep,
neat
yep.
stuff.
Yeah, man, it's really crazy. It's crazy because on a daily basis you see these things that you thought. I remember as a kid, right? Dick Tracy, right? Remember sitting there going, dude, that would be so cool to have a watch you could talk into, and now you're like, well, how about a watch that can, you can trade your portfolio on, you can talk, you can text, you can email. And you're looking at his kid going, what's text and email? You know what I mean? Like, just
Right.
it's just a crazy new world, man. Um,
So it's funny. I have a story here, and I remember the Super Bowl a long, long time ago. Ask Jeeves had uh, an ad, and they made themselves look like what an LLM is today. Where just ask it anything, and it's got the answer. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And I remember getting on there and doing it, and it turns out it's just a terrible search engine, not
Horrible.
right. But at the time, I remember thinking like, oh, I can ask it, and it will give me good answers. And then the first time I started using Perplexity, I'm like, this is what I thought Ask Jeeves was gonna be 20 years ago. This is great.
Yeah, it's wild, man. It's wild. It really is. It's you got to come up for a term with it though, right? Because we've all been used to technological advances. We've seen several of them in our lifetimes. We've witnessed them over the last 150 years. This one is different though because it's so unlimited, right? Like meaning the first time you touched, I remember the first time you looked at an iPhone or an iPod, you were really blown away. But all of that technology, like there was a natural constraint of some kind, number of songs you could hold, memory, all that kind of stuff. And it was still incredible, still amazing. This is the first kind of technology that I've seen in my life come out that feels just limitless, where you're like,
Right. It's
there
hard to
is no
find something
end.
it doesn't apply to. Right.
Right, that there is no end to it, and then you're like, then you're going, well, can it do this? And the answer is always yes, you know, and there are more yeses coming every single day, and yeah, it's certainly it's a scary, crazy, but also a remarkable and exciting time to be alive for sure.
Yeah.
What have we seen on the macro side of things? Any interesting news that came out? Any data that's come out between Friday and today?
So no data today. We'll get NFIB and CPI tomorrow, which that's gonna be a big deal. My like feeling moving forward for the next call it a few months is like each CPI is hot and that's awkward and rates go up and dollar goes up and like the chance of rate cuts goes down and then the jobs report comes out and it goes flying the other way and it's just like a violent ping pong on these two data sets until people will just realize like, oh, it's just stagflation, and we just all look at the Fed and go, which one do you care about? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no data today. As far as news goes, we did officially finally kick the 90-day can on the China trade ceasefire. We have Trump and Putin meeting this Friday in Alaska. We'll see what happens with that.
Do we even have discussions going on with China right now?
Yeah. It sounds like they are talking, but as it sounds like it's holding to my basic view that you're not going to get a breakthrough in a good or bad way because why would you? Oh, and other important news than, and I'll just be honest. This one grinds my gears, but the so we have the national security like trade restrictions on chips, right? Chip exports to China because of national security reasons. Well, now we're saying, well, you can send them some stuff if you pay us, the government, 15%. So that's like for Nvidia, AMD. Um, so I guess it's not a national security problem if you pay the government the VIG, but that this bothers me because this, in my opinion, literally unconstitutional to have an export tax of any sort. And now you have companies paying the government 15% for the privilege of exporting their product, and that's just bizarre to me. That is one I would expect if it ends up in court. The court's like, yeah, no, you can't do that. But that
Wonder what
it'll take
I don't even
9 months or whatever.
I don't even understand what the motivation would be.
Yeah, I got nothing for you on this one. It's bizarre to me.
Huh.
And to me, like it's either a national security thing or it's not. Like we can't play
Well,
both sides of it.
and you know, I am certainly not a warmonger. So I feel like, but I'm sitting there thinking, how would it not be a national security issue?
I'm actually sort of in the camp that the president has pivoted to. Uh, the problem with this is like China already figured this out, but this is an argument from a lot of the tech bros in Silicon Valley. Like don't keep them from don't like forget banning us selling them chips and stuff. They're gonna figure all this stuff out anyways. Get them hooked on our stuff at least. That way we can make a bunch of money. And then we kind of control their supply chain and some of the ways they control ours. So we did kind of reverse, like, all right, fine, you can have the like 1990 chips or whatever. Like, you just can't have the Gucci stuff. But even now, we're starting to like make it sound like, oh, well, you can have the Gucci stuff. We'll just put a small governor on it because Trump is even talking about allowing them to have Blackwells. And a lot of this obviously is because Jensen has been talking to him and you know elbowing him and like, let me sell them some chips, man. It's one of the reasons that the Nvidia stock's done so good. I'm okay with that. That makes sense to me because if not, they have their own giant supply chain. They export it all over the world, and we just kind of get our butt kicked, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I'm cool with it. But you can tell China's caught on because they're like, whoa, 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 maybe we don't want all these chips, and they're making the companies prove there's no back doors or anything like that through the chips. So I think they recognize like, no, we want to like this is going to hurt our own development of these, and we don't want that. So that's going to be interesting to watch moving forward. Like, they really open up to us and our chips, or are they going to just firewall the thing anyways?
You know, on the China, this is pivoting to a different part of this discussion entirely. But I spent some time kind of randomly over the weekend going down the Xi Jinping rabbit hole, just looking up different documentaries about his life, looking up different things, reading where he came from, all that kind of stuff. Um, you don't want to be an alarmist because you don't know when. Nobody does. But I don't think that the majority of the world is necessarily looking at him through the right light. And I think that the world, generally speaking, is really underestimating the likelihood that he takes Taiwan. After really digging into him and reading about stuff and watching some, just digging, um, I think he's going to take it. And I think it's going to happen sooner than anybody thinks. Um, and the reason why I did not I did not think the way that I think right now Wednesday of last week. Um, but if people want to know why I think it, I think that you should go look at the speech he gave at the beginning of this year on New Year's Day. It was either the last day of the year of 2024, first day of this year, but he gave like a national address, and right at the top of the ledger, right at the top of the list of things that he listed that he wanted to do. He talked about reunification, and that means taking Taiwan back. Um, I hadn't heard that speech. When I heard that speech and then turned around and looked at how little fanfare and little oxygen that was given around the world, that was kind of shocking to me. When a leader sits there and of a country like China and says in completely plain language, we're going to take Taiwan back. You would expect it to at least make more waves than it did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, the whole situation is very bizarre to me, and that feels like yet another situation that the world is walking blind into. And the other thing about Z is that he's been fairly predictable. If you want to know what he's going to do, he'll tell you. You know what I mean? And he's been very, very consistent. And it just feels like the whole world's whistling past that.
I mean, I can promise you no one listens to him because just in the last couple of weeks he's been very pro, like let's turn the economy more to consumption, which is the thing everyone's criticized China about for the last 20 years. And like he's saying, when it's go time, we're going to do it now, and no one's paying attention to that. So yeah, just the average Westerner isn't going to actually go deep on whole speeches or anything. What I will say on Taiwan, and I don't have a firm opinion either way. What I will say on Taiwan is that you can find some pretty intense rhetoric from China, to include Xi's era, about Taiwan. You can just pick any 5 year period over the last 30, and it sounds like, oh, they're going to do it here soon.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the only thing I would caution. The reason I think I try to go Occam's razor on this stuff. Like the reason I think they're serious about it is go look at their military equipment that they would use in doing it. It is purpose built, incredibly expensive stuff that is clearly the only use it has is an amphibious invasion of Taiwan. Like these crazy ships with these enormous arms that would like lower down to like put equipment on. It like literally just built for that. So when I look at stuff like that, I'm like it'd be kind of weird to like spend all the money on that and to not use it. So they probably will at some point. I don't know when. And if we're being honest with ourselves, the U.S. probably isn't going to do anything about it. So no one's probably going to do anything about it.
I had a interesting conversation with some friends that were over this weekend, and we were talking about this thing, and none of us had an answer. And the question was, if you were in Trump's shoes or just whatever, the president of the United States, and China goes into Taiwan, what do you do? And I'll be honest with you, I didn't have a reaction, or I didn't have an answer. I mean, yeah, I talk about a quandary. You know
Right.
what I mean?
There's no way. There's no way to win. There's no winning there. Like
No,
yeah. So
no,
to me, like the thing to do is to mine the living crap out of that area, put insane defensive measures up. Like, so one of the reasons that North Korea is such a problem and so scary is it's not nukes or anything like that or crazy missiles. They have an unholy amount of basic artillery aimed right at Seoul. So anything pops off and they can just unleash that. Like it doesn't. You can bomb it for a week straight, 24/7, and they still have a bunch. You know what I mean? So like do
yeah,
that. Like just make the coastline so imposing. There's no point. Like
yeah.
and the water. And now that you have autonomous underwater drones that can be bombs, right? Just have a bajillion of those buzzing around at any given time or whatever. Like you know,
Yeah,
just make it to where there's no point in even trying. That's the only thing you can do.
well, yeah, because you're right. The amphibious attacks the only way they go because China does not want to. Nobody would. You don't want to ruin the infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure is one of the reasons you want it, right? Taiwan, and so you're not going to carpet bomb it.
Right.
It beats up the infrastructure too much.
It
Uh,
it makes more sense for them to do the long game and just kind of take it the way they did Hong Kong. Just okay, well, it's kind of ours now, and like everyone's like, all right, fine.
it would be fascinating to know. There's no answer to this question, but it would be fascinating to know what, if anything, has changed in Z's outlook of this deal after watching the Russia-Ukraine situation.
Right.
because it really is very similar, right? Very similar setup. Um, and I have no idea what Taiwan's military capability is compared to Ukraine. I would assume it's better.
I wouldn't say that. And first of all,
They,
Taiwan's tiny. I mean, and
no,
it's
I
an island,
know.
so
Well, I know, but what do you got? 28 million people that live in Taiwan,
I don't know.
something like that.
We can look.
What did you have? I mean, what did you? How big was Ukraine?
But in that way, though, in that way, it makes it easier to defend in a lot of ways. Granted, being a floating aircraft carrier helps too.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. But they're pretty militarized, aren't they? I mean, Taiwan. I mean, don't we have a lot of weapon systems there for them? And
Sure, but compared to what China can do, it's just, I mean, you know, it's not a comparison. Like
okay,
if you sized up Russia versus Ukraine, and then you did the same for China versus Taiwan, it's more of a mismatch for sure.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So yeah, Taiwan has 23 million people. Ukraine has 43.
okay. Yeah, okay. So yeah, definitely a different setup. Um, yeah, that'll be really interesting to see the way that rolls out. The other interesting thing too, and somebody was pointing this out in one of the, I can't remember, it was something I was reading or something that I was watching, but um, now on the positive side for China, and every time I bring up baby boomers, I inevitably hear some of our clients like, will email me and think I'm like talking badly about them, right? Um, so look, when I say baby boomers, I obviously don't mean all of them. But it there's an interesting cultural dynamic in China that I haven't heard anybody talk to, and that after Z leaves, the cultural balance of the next generations is very, very different, right? Like the next generation up behind Z is the same generation that did Tiananmen Square, right? And so much more Western friendly, much less ideological. Um, I was sitting there kind of looking at that whole deal going, hopefully we can avoid some really nasty things, at least in time for that next generation to come into power, because I think they're going to be more reasonable. And I think they're generally going to be more democracy friendly. And I think they're going to be, generally speaking, more willing to work toward peace and be in partnership with the West as opposed to competition. Um, but yeah, that was it was an interesting observation. Um, and kind of an interesting thing to read about, that there's some internal cultural strife where those younger generations, the people in our society would be Gen Xers. um, they are not the hardcore Maoists. That is a different thinking, and a different group of folks entirely. And you would think it would be a good thing if they get a more are more widely represented, and that attitude, that cultural attitude, is more widely represented, because I just don't see that with Z at all. I don't think that he cares anything, and to his credit, I mean, that's his job, right? He's running China. But I don't think cooperation, I think that he cares about one thing and one thing only, and that is, if it benefits China. If it doesn't, you can go fly a kite.
Yeah, I mean the thing is pretty clear. Even to their own detriment, like geopolitically and stuff. At often, like there's been so many times where you know President Trump has sort of alienated a partner, and you could tell like the partner's like, well, I'll show him. I'm gonna go flirt with China, and then China's just like, whatever, go away. Like, and every time I'm just like, why wouldn't you take like Europe and put your arm around him? Like, we got you, man. Let's go. Let's team up. Like or you get it with the small scale, the India, Brazil, you name it, and every time they're like, no, like we're still gonna keep taking advantage of you.
Yeah, yeah, it is strange. It feels, to me, it feels very short, like you said, even to their own detriment. It feels very short-sighted on their part, and I don't know if
That's
that's
why they
just
don't have
culture.
any hard. That's why I don't really have any hardcore friends other than maybe Russia. Like they just don't like no one because they're really in it to just win everything they can, not to. But that's why they have been so successful. I don't know.
Yeah, it was also hilarious listening to some of their spokespeople, like trying to. I watched a few videos about the trade issues between the two countries and stealing of intellectual property, and just hearing them come out and say that's completely concocted. We've never stolen intellectual property, and you're sitting there going, "Dude, come on!" Like talk about the worst kept secret ever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, well, and to be, I mean, that's how it was kind of a pay to play situation. A lot of companies offered up some of their IP just to be able to get in there and take
Yeah.
advantage of that
It's a
cheaper labor.
great business model. Like, yeah, you can have access to our giant market. It's just the fine print's gonna hurt. And
Well, that's
all of
something,
our companies willingly did it.
well, and that's something that Trump said many times that I completely agree with. You know, do we need to deal with China? Of course. Is China, are they an adversary? Of course. Are they an ally? No. However, I don't hold them responsible for the ways that they took advantage of these trade relationships and all that kind of stuff. I hold our own people responsible for being so stupid and just and being, you know, complete tools. In the honest sense of the term. Um, and just kind of getting sucked into it. You know what I mean? I blame ourselves for being asleep at the wheel. Don't blame them at all. Um, are we hearing any more economic data coming out of China in terms of are we seeing any more examples of the stimulus
It's
starting
been
to kick in over there?
yes, it's been a little slow here lately, but there is some important stuff coming out this week that will tell us some more. We're gonna get like money supply and stuff this week. So FDI, which has been terrible, which might start picking back up. And you're also going to see like home sales and prices, retail sales, industrial production. So it's a big week for Chinese data as well. And I think a lot
Um,
of this stuff's going to keep picking up more than people expect at this point.
really?
Yeah, that's my view.
Well, I hope you're right. Because boy, in especially in light of that stimulus and global liquidity and all that kind of stuff, it just feels like I feel like Chinese equities are a tinderbox that could just go up at any moment. You know what I mean? Um, because they are cheap. I know that we've talked a lot about it. There's opposing views out there, really smart people that think they're going to continue to go down a lot. It's just hard for me to see it. I think and we've talked about this before, but I think the one indicator that has been the most trusting, the most trustworthy, that's given you the least amount of positives is go buy the equities wherever they are pumping the hardest. And to my knowledge, I haven't seen that not work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're
Um,
even. I mean, they're even pushing back on people buying bonds because they don't want them to do it because that was turned into like a feverish thing where everyone was buying the bonds. They're starting to tax people like trying to tax people for trading in U.S. and Hong Kong assets because they're trying to corral the money at home. Like they're everything you would want somebody to do to get their equities up, they're doing it. So they're
I love
probably
it.
going to get them up.
Yeah, just got to get those international. I would think you got to get those international flows. When you get big equity rallies in China, I wonder if it is mostly driven by external investment or whether that's internal. I would think most of that's probably external flows, wouldn't it be?
Not necessarily. No, like the if you go back to some of the crazy bubbles they've had, a lot of it was domestic money for sure.
Really?
I
Okay.
mean, you've had hot money, but if you look at the last 18 months, 20 months, like they have dramatically outperformed the U.S. equity market, and that's without almost any money coming from overseas. Like that's not
Well,
to
yeah,
mention it's
yeah,
without
but I mean,
it's without inflation or anything.
yeah, but I mean that was also after what, a 65% fall from the top or something like that.
Yeah, but still, I mean, you're talking about you're basically going. You've gone 2 years with them beating the U.S. It's not like the U.S. has had a rough time of it throughout that 2 years.
That's
So
true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it's crazy because I mean, there's still, I mean, those equities are still in the tank. You know what I mean?
right.
It's hardly any frothy
And,
about
and you
your.
go, we're talking about all this AI stuff. Like Alibaba's doing all the same stuff, and they have models that compete with ours. They're basically neck and neck, and and you look at the valuation, or you look at you know BYD's are worth 100 billion and Tesla's worth a trillion, and then go look at how many cars they each sell and how profitable they are on those cars and who can actually do self driving, and it goes on down the list. And it's the
I,
same for
you,
you pick a sector and they probably have a player that is out competing and is dramatically cheaper.
yeah. Yeah, Tesla's an interesting one to me. I can't wait for Tesla's next Q. I don't think I've ever seen a rally where you know that the underlying reality is so different from the price action, right? It's not like sitting back right now and going, like betting against whether they're going to be able to pull this off or not pull this off. You know which direction the underlying fundamentals are going, and the stock price is just going the opposite direction. Um, and I'm really interested. It'll be fascinating the next Q to see if there is something that they're going to announce that will justify the movement of the stock
Of course not.
because
It's not
I don't.
impossible. Yeah.
It's not impossible, but
No, I said not possible. I'll say it is impossible to
oh
justify the price. Yeah.
no. But I mean, like, I don't understand what people like. Do they think that revenues from robots are going to start coming this year? Like, I don't get that. Like, I literally don't get the long story.
No one's thinking about it like that. Some people on Wall Street pretend to, but they're not either.
Then then you had a guy like Ron Barron, who's a successful investor, not a stupid individual by any stretch of the imagination, in there talking about how it's a great time to buy Tesla stock. Now, of course, he's talking his book. He's been a long time owner, but I'm looking at Ron going at 1.1, what are we, 1.1, $1.2 trillion market cap now, sales, revenues, margins, every financial indicator going hard the other direction. Yeah,
The crazy thing is
it's
it's flat for 4 years and still wildly expensive. Like it's just crazy to think of it that way.
well,
Usually when something goes flat for 4 years, you're like, all right, reality's caught up. Now it makes sense. And no.
no. Well,
Speaking of, should we go through the indexes because we have not.
yeah. Run us down the rundown. Yeah, and we'll use that to kind
We'll
of
do it at
wrap
the end
things
instead
up
of the
here.
beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Macro
S and
Monday,
P
baby. We get crazy.
S&P closed down 0.25. The Q's down 0.3. Smalls were flat. Equal weight down 0.27. Mag 7 was basically flat. All world ex-US down 0.35, and that's because the dollar was up 0.25. Bitcoin had a crazy pop and drop. Bitcoin got up to, let's see here. This thing looked like a massive breakout, and by the end of the day, you're like, well, never mind. Yeah, Bitcoin on the day. Of course, I'm sure it's not going to play ball here. Got it to 122 and change, and then closed at
Whoa,
119.
whoa.
Yep.
Oh, so
So
Bitcoin rallied big over the weekend too. Then.
big. It's mostly the day. Well, yesterday and the day, both. But yeah, you got to over 122 and then faded by $3,000 almost instantly. Oil pretty flat. Gold down 2.5. Silver down 2. Platinum, palladium up a little bit. Yields totally flat.
What
As
was
mentioned earlier,
any news or boy, you didn't see it in the miners today.
the miners
I
held
was
up.
even
It's the whole. We talked about this last week, but the whole tariffing gold imports and then just kidding on that is what really I think hit gold.
yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, right. You're right. It is notable how well miners hung in there, and then some were down for sure. But broadly speaking, they held up decent given a 2.5% day.
Well, it makes
Um,
all the sense. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. I mean, I that's what they should do. I mean,
yeah,
the the price of gold has so far outrun those things. I mean, you feel like gold should be able to sell off by 20% and still see the miners go up in price. Um,
yeah, and and
but
and they may have to prove that coming up. I mean, gold's still a mile from its 200-week moving average. Central banks are really slowing down their purchases, so it feels like it should have. Like we talked about coming into this, ooh, man, stock market just feels like it needs. And I'm not saying crazy, but 5, 6, 7, 8% drawdown here. Just
mhm.
work off some of the craziness. I feel the same for gold. It just needs to go down 15% to kind of reset. But even in that, if it did, unless oil is skyrocketing, I would think man, miners should hold their ground reasonably well. And to be fair to the miners, I think we talked about maybe, but you chart miners versus the underlying metal, and that's breaking out in the last couple of weeks. So we
Yeah.
really are seeing that outperformance.
I just, yeah, I'll still stand by my whole call that I just cannot see us retesting. I just cannot see us not retesting the 3,000 level on gold and then probably 2,850 below it. I'll be shocked. I'll be shocked if you break out to a new all time high right here. Now, you pulled back hard off it today, so you weren't, but you were threatening a new all time high last week. You got up there to 34.90 and change, I want to say. Intraday on one of those days.
Yeah, you put in a
Um,
new high. You put in a new high intraday on futures at least because of the tariff stuff. But
we, we,
that was a
we
spike that faded.
what was that level? I thought we'd crossed 3,500 before intraday.
You had gotten up to about, let's see here. You got to like 35.10 back in April, and then this time you got up to about 35.30, 35.35.
Oh wow. Okay.
So it was just like a wild spike whenever it came out that we were tariffing the imports. And then
Okay.
as soon as they were like, "Oh, whoa, hold on," and then next thing you know, you're back down to 3,400.
Yeah. I will say this though, seeing this pullback in gold just today, the action in crypto, all that kind of stuff. It feels like an environment that's going to be stubborn, but it does feel like it warrants some caution here. I just all of a sudden I don't like the way a lot of things are trading, and for all the reasons we've discussed, I'd be really surprised if we don't see some volatility here in the next
Yeah,
couple weeks.
100%.
Like you said, the seasonality for it. Um, the nice thing about it, though, I will say this is it's I think it's kind of a gift to be able to sit there and look at this backdrop and then look at vol with a 16 handle on it.
It's
Um,
always cheapest when you should be getting it.
yeah, yeah.
Front month VIX futures under 17. Given everything we're talking about, like the setup it doesn't make sense. Uh,
No, and it's one of those things too where like, look, you never know how a trade's going to work out, especially a hedge like that. But yeah, you're kind of at a level where you're like, man, I feel irresponsible not buying some here.
yeah, I mean, no two ways about it. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's yeah,
it's a good opportunity.
it's like seeing a giant wave coming in off the coast and getting some last minute flood insurance. Maybe it's an optical illusion. Maybe it'll dissipate. Maybe it won't get to you. But better be safe than sorry.
No, nobody wants to do that stuff until it's already at 23 and flying higher, and there, you're having a CNBC special of markets in turmoil. Then people want to go buy some vol.
Oh yeah.
Not when they're giving it away in Cracker Jack boxes.
No, no, no. That's no fun then. No. Anyway, all right, pal. Well, you got anything else, Tad?
Nope, all set.
All
Big
right,
day
buddy.
tomorrow. Inflation.
There we go. All right, you guys. That'll be it for today. Have a wonderful evening. And as always, catch us on social media, on YouTube. Just search Know Your Risk Podcast. Not hard to find. Got some great stuff coming up later in the week, including an outstanding AI interview we're going to finally get done. Not going to want to miss that, but it's probably either going to be Thursday or Friday. We should firm that up over the next day or two, and I'll let you guys know. But anyway, until tomorrow, have a great evening. Listen to the Know Your Risk Podcast. Download and subscribe at knowyourriskpodcast.com.
Investment advice cannot be given without a client service agreement. Zach Abraham is an investment advisor representative of Trek Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor. Bulwark Capital Management is a marketing name only and does not carry a separate registration.